Nick, I want to be the wind beneath your wings. And if you're jealous of Nick, no worries. In fact, another episode of the Valley of Spirits is on its way, so you'll feel just like Nick soon.
Hopefully our listeners do, Jordan. Today we're joining you from the Wayfarer's Rest in Silvermoon. With Jordan being awoken only a few years ago, and his work to free the Dragon House taking up much of his time, we decided it's time to have his first time in Silvermoon. So we decided to visit my apartment. Jordan, what'd you think?
It was huge. It was absolutely gorgeous, I'll be honest with you. I'm glad I don't have to clean it. But your maid's very sweet, very nice. That's the only way I could imagine somebody keeping that place clean. It's absolutely enormous. Tons of bathrooms, an indoor pool. Absolutely crazy.
Well, when I have to go away so long, that's why I have a maid. Because I had to go, help you with the Dragon Isles.
Welcome aboard. Thank you. Thank you. The Dracthyr do appreciate you for the Horde. But, I don't really see that as so much. My favorite part about having a cave is like the rats and the worms and things like that. Just maintain that kind of stuff for you while you're gone. It's like a maid in a way. Yeah. So caves are self-maintaining. It's a good plus. They always stay damp,
Big selling point.
Honestly.
Well,
I'm not selling my cave, bro. You better not be saying I'm selling my cave.
I think you could afford something nice, too, because you have what is it? Your own pot of gold you sleep on, or pile of gold, and then you have the guest room has one?
Yeah, we have a guest pile. Don't take anything from it. But we do have the guest pile, yes. The guest pile of gold. That's what makes me feel at home, sleeping on gold, just right. Lizard things.
Just lizard things.
So we ended up being at your bar, the Wayfarer's Rest, as it's called, right?
Yep.
And so you have a new hire. What's her name? She's been awesome. What's her name?
Phaestra. She's pretty good.
No, I'm impressed. She's been keeping our drinks full and our content ready. So, are we ready to move into what we did this week?
Yeah, Jordan, why don't you recap us with your week first?
So I actually did not get to play a whole ton this week like I normally get to. I didn't realize I was going to be so busy for the 4th and holidays. But the next week, I will be back in full throttle. I kind of missed it. It's interesting to be like sitting down at a holiday party, eating a hot dog, being like, man, I haven't done any mythics this week. It's like, oh my God. So I miss it. I'm coming back full throttle. I can't stop. You know me, retail's my baby. But everything's good in moderation, as they say, just like on the WoW loading screen. So I'll start with what I did in raiding. We did do some LFRs earlier in the week, like Tuesday, Wednesday. We had a couple of the guildies come for our usual guild nights, and we did some LFRs. Summertime, things cool down. People are busy. People are doing a lot of stuff like that. So we didn't have the turnout we normally got for something like that, but the guys who were ready to walk in and learn some LFRs got a little bit more of a taste the last week. But with dungeons, I did do some zeros with a couple of guild members.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, earlier in the weeks, they haven't played a lot of the dungeons. It was cool to we did Azir Vault with our snow on the ground boss, one of our favorites that we always preach about. I love that boss. So much fun.
That's a great one.
I also did do a little bit of keys with a neighboring guild, is what I'll say. I got up to a +7 total, was the highest key we got onto, but we had a lighter healer. We were helping their healer along. So we ended up turning keys down, did a lot of 5s and 6s. Ultimately got to a 7, which is pretty cool. With PvP, we did end up playing some PvP with a neighboring guild of ours. We'll have to see if we can name the guild or not. But neighboring guildie came out to play some PvP with you and I, and he provided some good insight. I was pretty impressed. Very good player.
Amazing insight, yeah. Really let me know that I need a lot more work on PvP.
And we do want to touch on more about this in the Tavern Talk for sure, but he's definitely a PvP player. That is definitely what he does pretty much all the time.
Yeah, it is what he does.
And we'll talk about how we feel about that coming up in the Tavern Talk for sure. I didn't play any Panda Remix, any Cata Classic, or any Hardcore, which Nick's going to roast me for later, I'm sure. Yes, he's the classic man. He is ready for the grind, ready for the pain, and I'm a retail baby,
It's okay. We'll just abuse you with more hardcore.
with more grind.
More grind.
Anyway, Nick, so enough about me. Enough about me then, Nick. What did you get up to this week?
Well, I also didn't have a lot of time this week due to the 4th and some life events going on. But next week, as Jordan said too, I'm going to be back in the full swing of things in my normal fashion in Warcraft. How else am I going to pay for this apartment in Silvermoon? Let's be honest.
For real, that's tight.
Yeah.
It's tight.
My raiding and dungeons this week were pretty much wrapped onto the same focus. I've been hopping between my 2 lower geared paladins in order to get them as high as possible before the launch of the War Within. Currently, they're in the range of 480, 485 eye level range. They've both have touched the LFR. It takes forever for anything to drop out of that, it feels like. For instance, I needed hands, and I had finally gotten a pair of 480 to drop, and I had 424 hands. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is my time to shine. Like, let's go. Needed on it was the highest roller, like 60, 70. And then the other tank paladin hits does a need roll and just got a 94. I'm like, well, that's great. Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
I do feel LFR loot is hit or miss.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, I'll add that to the notes right now. We'll talk about LFR loot in the Tavern Talk. Because I have some long-winded opinions on that. And we'll see what kind of time we're at.
Oh, that'll be fun. But yeah, if possible, I'd like to get them to over 500, just so that way they're not too far behind on the Rep Pally main when we have the new expansion launch. For PvP, as Jordan mentioned, we did end up doing it with a neighboring guildie, and it was awesome. The guy showed us really what is all about doing PvP, because that is what he does. He does not do PvE at all. So it was pretty entertaining and pretty enjoyable, because going with him in some 3v3s was like, we're going up against people that we would not normally see. And it was like, oh shit, it's over quick.
They had lots of good insights, like, okay, we have a druid coming in, so interrupt Cyclone. Like, he had a lot of... It was sweet. We'll talk about it coming up.
Yeah. For Panda, Kata, and Classic Hardcore, I haven't touched those at all either, so I can't give Jordan too much crap this week.
Oh, it's coming, though. I'm sure it's coming.
Oh, it will.
So for the guilds, we talked about it a little bit. We didn't do anything too exciting, just our usual, doing a couple of LFRs to get them a taste. During the rotating weeks, it can be a lot to swallow. It's like, okay, this week we're doing normal this. It's kind of like, okay, so I have a whole new set of mechanics I've never seen before.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you do. So let's do the LFR. You're right. Let's talk about this raid. So we ended up deciding on LFRs and then doing some Mythic Zeros as always, they're always juicy. I think they're fun. I like Zeros a lot. I like where they're at. They're about to get a little harder, so we'll see how that goes.
I think Zeros are fantastic. That squish really provided a lot for Zeros in a great way.
No, definitely. It makes them such a milestone. It makes them something where, where we were talking about problems with dungeon etiquette in our past episode. It is almost like the perfect barrier between dungeon etiquette and then, additional mechanics and craziness.
Yeah, because you still have...
You can make a mistake or two. You're not going to get...
You can make mistakes in a zero, and it's not going to kill you. And I like the fact that it did take away the timer, because it gives you that ability to teach people in that zero to learn, starting at that level. Because you still have... Like, if you go do a time walking or you go do a regular dungeon, that lack of etiquette is still in a heroic level. But when you hit zero, it starts to kind of strip away.
No, wake up.
Yeah. Which is great. That's why I love that squish. It's put me on a bit of a struggle bus, because I'm, like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm used to doing like 16, 17 keys, and I'm like, 6 is like a fucking challenge. But it makes sense when we squish it down, and a 0 is supposed to be as hard as a 10.
So I do like where it's at, definitely. I don't know about them going a bit harder when the War Within comes out, and everything's... We do actually have an interview coming up with the legend Sully, which we'll talk about here coming up shortly once we get closer to affixes. They have a lot of interesting changes in War Within, and nothing set in stone. They keep backing things out or including new things. There's all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
because they came out with how they were going to change the affixes for the War Within, and they had such pushback. They gave us that what do you say her name?
Xalatath.
Naifu. They gave us Naifu. Her abilities. that new affix, which I do and don't like, but we'll talk about that in the interview, so we'll save that for later.
Absolutely. So on to hot fixes. We do have a couple this week.
No, it's so nice. They actually put hotfixes out.
So why don't you read these off, and then I'll just have hot takes on them. All right.
That's good, Jordan. So for hotfixes, there's achievements and items in retail that were fixed. For achievements, what's down there will now require 1 massive lunker instead of 2. That's not a fish will now require 5 massive lunkers instead of 10. We're going to need a bigger harpoon will now require 10 massive lunkers instead of the original 25. I do like how they always put puns to like Jaws or other movie
The achievements,
references.
quest names. It's absolutely adorable.
I love the puns in
it.
it.
Cracks me up. It doesn't crack me up every time, but sometimes it does. So it's really good.
So, yeah, there's times where I'm like, oh, okay, it's not like a bad face palm. It's like, I can't believe that you made that joke. Like,
And then
it's
sometimes
just
you'll
bad.
you'll be questing in the late of night with your eyes barely open. You'll be like, he's talking about too many fish, and so we got to fish.
Yep.
Definitely.
No, I love it. Anyway, on to items. Ominous Conch cooldown lowered to 1 minute instead of the previous 5 minutes. The drop rate for Ominous Conch has increased when found in a Tuskar tackle box. Ominous Conch now has a maximum stack size of 20. So, 2 major things that they fixed in retail and achievements and items. Obviously, they're all around the same subject or whatever it is, and take that whatever it is out.
Right, they're kind of niche because a lot of these are, if you are working on getting these achievements, super easy now.
Yeah.
Ominous Conch works how it was intended to, instead of being stupid and hard and a really rare item that you never actually use, right?
Yep.
So a couple of quality of lives there for sure.
Oh, yeah. While Panda Remix had some hotfixes as well, several issues with the achievement Elusive Foes and the Timeless Isles has been fixed. No additional information from Blizzard on these issues was provided. In Cataclysm Classic, an issue preventing the completion of Bounce has been fixed. Great news, too. Cataclysm pre-made group activities are now available in the group finder. And that wraps it up for our hotfixes. We only really had one big one come out, and that was what they gave us for this week. It's a little better than not having any.
It's interesting. The several issues found with the achievement Elusive Foes Timeless Isle, which is a part of the Timeless Isle Completionist achievement. So it's funny how there is no additional information on these issues being provided. What that means is I think they have no way to back credit anybody who did the thing they fixed. They're just like, yeah, we fixed something.
Yeah, they either fixed it or found it somehow, or it's just so much that you probably
Which I
don't
think
want
is
to give the
interesting.
detail.
No
Yeah.
additional issue or no additional information. We did have a couple of esports updates, which I was going to touch on. The MDI Great Push, which is interesting. What I like about it from a fundamental perspective is it is who can actually grind the highest level keys, period. Like with the gear you can get, or they get to bring character clones. So whatever kind of gear you can get, they get to walk into and play actually super insane dungeon scaling. Like they can't just do, well, they do sometimes do one big pull, but they have different affixes for each dungeon type. And then they have to play it on a 20, a 21, right? It's just really intense to... My biggest complaint about the last MDIs is they were doing it so fast and so quick that it was like speedrunning.
Right.
It wasn't actually about the strategy of the dungeon. What I like about this approach is the keys levels are so high and so intense that it's about if you can get through it. Like these guys are wiping on this a couple of times, which you should watch and take a look, and maybe take a look at the bracket. I won't get too into detail in it because there's a lot to digest from it. If you guys do want to hear more about esports, definitely let us know in the comments on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to this.
Yeah. Please let us know. We like to watch the esports going on in a while because for us, it lets us kind of analyze what they're doing and see how they go. Oh my God, they saw this new thing. But really, let us know if you want to hear more about the WoW esports. We both enjoy watching it. It's something we're passionate about because we get to watch these teams do some crazy stuff like run 20-plus keys and watch how they deal with the affixes and everything.
You just really have to see it for yourself. I like that they're pushing the keys so high. You watch things like Algathar Academy, where all 5 of them are a cute little bundle, and they all do all the trees perfectly. It's just, wow.
Yeah.
They really are elite. Rather than just watching them not have to care about that and just blow everything up and pull 50 million mobs into the boss, it's like, okay. You know, for a player like me who isn't elite like those guys, it is really exciting to watch them have to do the mechanic and do it flawlessly. Like they nailed the dance on ice, right?
Right.
It's crazy. That's why I was really got to see it for yourself. Got to check out the new MDI Great Push if you haven't. It's a lot more about what key levels can you do rather than who can do it the fastest, which I think is a better approach. The coming week. So the holidays, we did wrap up with the fireworks spectacular, and this Midsummer Fire Festival is over now. However, that does not mean... Well, I guess we'll start with things that were over. So moving on to events. So starting on Tuesday, the PvP Brawl Temple of Hot Mogu will end, and the Arena Skirmish bonus event will end. There will also, unfortunately, the Midsummer Fire Festival came to a conclusion on the 5th, so a couple days ago now at time of recording. And if you didn't get a chance to go to one of the capital cities or Booty Bay, which is where all the homies hang out, so I've been told. I always was an org boy. But I hear everybody hangs out in Booty Bay for the fireworks. If you didn't, there's always next year, don't worry. They always fire big fireworks.
Insert butt joke here.
Insert butt joke. So less about the stuff that is ending, more about the stuff that is starting. We have the World Quest bonus event beginning, which is where you can go back to expansions that have World Quest, even if there are older expansions you want to do, things like Legion, things like Battle for Azeroth, and the rep from those quests is increased by 50%. We get the PvP Brawl South Shore versus Torrin Mill. So this is murder, murder, murder. You show up. It is whoever gets the most kills, gets the most score. They essentially unleash 40v40 madness. And it's definitely worth a game or two. Don't get too into it. If you play something like a warrior or something incredibly melee specific like a rogue, it's going to be very hard. Breaking the line is going to be, this is war. You have joined. This is not a battleground anymore. This is war. All the mages will be like, oh, rogue. Pew, 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 pew. So it is, what it ends up being is era of the ranged, but I have a mage, so we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm gonna see some South 4 versus Torrin Mill. And if you want to be the elite warrior that has enough gear to be able to play melee in the war, then get in there and destroy. I will heal you. For the Horde. We also have, starting on the 7th, so it will actually be 2 days before you're hearing this, the Dark Moon Fair begins. Which you talked about the Dark Moon Fair. There's a lot of cool cosmetics to get. They're not super hard. You also get to do some cute things in the game, like ride the Ferris wheel and get the tokens for the gambling game and the tickets. There's a lot of cool things to do in the Dark Moon Fair. It is running from the 7th until the 13th. So at the time of hearing this, you will only have 4 days remaining to work on it. So make sure if you were trying to grind something in the Dark Moon Fair, it does come around all the time. You've heard us talk about it. I don't know. We've had 4 episodes, 4 or 5 talking about it at this point.
Yeah.
So it comes around. But if you are interested in grinding out some Dark Moon Fair, your opportunity will be coming up this week. We definitely have something exciting coming for you in the second half of this topic, but we are going to move into affixes. The first one is Fortified. Non-boss enemies have 20% more health and inflict up to 30% increased damage, so this is Trash Week. Remember that your first pulls are not going to be as gross or nasty as they were this last week. You will have to focus on trash. Interrupts are going to be incredibly important. Group CC, things like that. Want to remember trash is going to, this means timers will be a little harder. You'll have to be a little more chill with timers, remember, as trash kills your timers when trash is hard. The second affix this week will be Entangling. While in combat, entangling vines periodically appear and snare players. A little bit more of a problem for long casters, but I'm sure you guys, the mages out there, at this point have gotten used to being able to blink out of it, or hunters are good at disengaging in the right direction when it works, or just walking because they have so many abilities that they can use while they're moving. Things like that. Melee, remember, You do, if you have to leave melee range, it is worth it because you'll get stunned for a certain amount of time or rooted if you stand in it. So make sure that you break it. You can rotate around the boss. There's a couple of options, but it is worth missing a smack or two to get out of the entangling. Other than that, pretty much a not a fix, not complicated. It's obvious and clear on the ground. We're not doing... It doesn't show up in, like, a Murgicel when there's, like, green ground and grass everywhere.
Right.
So it's easy to see. So for people who play a little bit deeper, there is bolstering. When any non-boss enemy dies, its death cry empowers nearby allies, temporarily increasing their damage by 20%. Bolsters allies within 30 yards upon death, increasing their damage then by 20% for 20 seconds. Stacks. Bolstering is terrifying. And so for those ladies and gents that are tough enough to play 10 keys and higher consistently, you will want to keep this in mind. This is a pretty gross combination. You have a fortified and you have bolstering on top of each other. The trash is going to be hard and smacking harder. And then it's going to get, when one of them dies, it's going to get more angry and smack even harder.
It's going to be
this
such
affects
a fun
stacks.
week.
The sweaty strategy is to kill things at the same time. The unsweaty strategy is kill things evenly. You want them all to die pretty much around the same time. You don't want everybody to target the big guy and have him die right away because you just bolstered all the little guys. So you want everything to kind of die around the same time, if you can help it. That does bridge us to the second half of our affix talk, which we brought in the legendary Sully, which plays in a neighboring guild of ours. Yep.
They are fantastic. Like, they are, I think we made the comment too, they're the encyclopedia damn near of WoW.
They really are. Well, let us stop speaking for them. Without further ado, here is our interview with Sully. Here it is. The legend themselves, Sully, has joined us for another edition to the Valley of Spirits podcast.
Woo!
So, Sully, you're already critically acclaimed around these parts. We already love talking about Sully.
Yes.
Would you introduce yourself? Who are you? Why are you here? Why do we trust you? What do you do well?
I'm Sully. Hi, I go by they, them. I've been playing since mid to late BFA. Can't exactly give a time, but yeah. I mostly do like kind of high-end content with keys. I've done heroic rating, all that other good shit, and I am a walking encyclopedia, so feel free to ask me whatever.
This is true.
Truth be told. Where do you get this item? Sully knows.
Yep. How do we do this? Sully knows.
Sully knows.
Go ask Sully is pretty much what happens sometimes.
So we had a couple of questions we were going to ask Sully. Nick, you wanna spin us off?
Yeah. So Sully, how do you feel about the current affixes? What irks you? What makes you feel good about it? All the whole shebang.
My only issue with the current affixes is that I don't really have a group to do keys, so I mostly pug it. So coming from the mindset of people who pug, once you get to around, I think they're going to keep the key level the same. So once you get around to like 10s or higher, people get a little bit more pickier on what they're going to let in. And
Okay.
so with the new affixes, it's just, according to the charts, only 2 tanks are going to be good like 3 out of the 4 weeks.
Right.
If you don't have those tanks, good luck getting in, especially for DPS, because certain DPS will be doing better. I do kind of like the Kiss Curse mechanic, because we've been asking for that since forever, and Blizzard takes forever to come up with good ideas like that.
Yeah, I will say they've kind of been following, like, they've been listening to a lot of player feedback, like, about affixes in general, too. But overall, like, I've seen a lot of people just bitch about stuff, and then it comes back, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Recently.
Well, I look at it,
100%.
yeah, because they are trying to make a good balance between affixes that make things more challenging and affixes that are
Right.
crippling. You know, there's a balance here.
Well, and even you and I, Jordan, have discussed in one episode about how Warrior becomes useless for a week because you don't have some things to deal with the affixes, which is
Right, I slow deal with incorporeals.
Which is exactly
or
what Sully's
right.
talking about, too, when you get the hierarchies.
So certain DPS aren't going to be doing that great certain weeks because it'll be like bleed damage does more damage this week, or magic, like certain magic types will be doing more damage this week, and it's like that's cool, but knowing pugs, they think like the 1% where they're like, I need that extra like 0.2% of damage to get through this key like 5 seconds faster.
I agree
Right.
with you. Because you're going to watch people that's like, what, you're not playing Frost? It's Frost and Fire damage week. Come on, Arcane Mage, what are you doing?
Right, and even then, it goes to the point of, does it even matter, like, to the fact of, okay, I'm not playing the right spec, but I still output damage and I know my class really well, so I kind of overcome that, so to speak, or still a good proponent to have in that dungeon.
Yeah, it's like I tell people all the time because I used to be a meta slave and it's not fun. Honestly,
Yeah.
just play whatever you want. You eventually get to the point that you're so good with your class, a majority of the time, unless you're doing like the 0.5% of keys in the top tier, you'll be out DPSing just about everybody.
I mean, that's why I play paladin, so, you know.
I mean, they talk about
Just
these
the
affixes
magical
like
version
10...
of Unga Bunga.
Big Unga Bunga.
Yeah, Mr. Unga
They talk
Bunga,
about
baby.
these affixes acting like they don't know their own player base is the thing. Like, because to be honest with you,
yeah.
a 10% damage increase on specific types of damage is not a game-breaking thing.
No.
Is it when you get up to 20, 25 keys?
Oh yeah, when you
do you
when
have
you get
to
up
have
to
it?
like those, it's a different story. Because then you're really
but
like
I watch
biting the
people.
bullet.
You're right, Sully. You're right. I hear people at 6, 8 keys saying like, "You're not an arcane mage on Arcane Week. What are you doing?
Now,
We can't bring this guy."
So do you think, now you're talking a 6 and current plus 6, right?
Well, they're talking about making it a secondary effects, which would be 5 and higher.
Yeah. Okay, but hold on. So we're talking, because I wonder if the current squish that's happened this season has an effect on, especially with the affixes, people's decisions on what to bring and getting more stuck into the meta, if that makes sense. Because we went from, okay, a +1's a +1 or whatnot, to, okay, now a +2 is actually a 12 in the old style that we're so used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Pretty
don't
much.
want I don't want them to take back the I do feel like the difficulty hike was good.
Oh, no, I think it's great. I'm not saying take it away at all. I loved it.
Is where mythics are right now are awesome. Just think
Yes.
about, people we've played with from, some neighboring guilds. There is a lot of people who benefit from the opportunity of learning a mythic dungeon without the affixes, right?
Well, and even
We're
our
not talking
own...
about that, though. We're
Yeah,
here to talk about affixes.
No, I'm just saying I think that has a part to play in the meta, though. Of people being choosy on who to bring in.
So, let's dive away from the meta and the learning player experience. We're keeping on people that are going to play keys and higher. So we talked a little bit about the original proposed affix. Sully, what changes would you make if you had to pick one? What changes would you make to the... I'm not talking the Xalatath affix, but the new affixes they're talking about with like Frost and Fire damage bonus, the Arcane bonus. Is there some changes you would make to any of those? Or do you think that's kind of like dead in the water?
I mean, I understand where they're coming from because they did mention they wanted the keys to start speaking for themselves more and less affix heavy type stuff. But it's just I don't really trust the system. Like I get where they're coming from, but I just don't trust it because of the community.
Right. Right. And they have to play to this community. They have to make it... I agree. We're definitely, I would say at best, mid on the first affixes that they published.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Xalatath affix? This is the one where you get lots of options. You can CC it, you can interrupt it, you can, ring a peace hit, you can do all kinds of things to this affix. What do you think about the new Xalatath affix?
I like that they're bringing back seasonal affixes again because those, in my opinion, were fun when they were done right. Like, I liked the Razageth affix because, I liked getting the haste and damage buff. The part I didn't like was how they handled it because when it first came out, it was just the tank could get stunned because the DPS or a healer weren't paying attention and they didn't run over them to get rid of their debuff, and everybody's dead. And then they tried fixing it so that way the tank would get a specific one and it wouldn't change. And it's just like, this still is not helping. For the Razageth one, not the Razageth, Zalatath. I like the idea of it. My only issue is I think we're gonna run into that problem of if you don't have an AoE like interrupt or a group with an AoE interrupt, you might be a little screwed.
Yeah, that's something we talked about on another episode, is that they could have continued with Incorporeals and Afflicted, but done what they did with the Zalatath stuff and kept it at a 2 max like pop-up that you have to fix in an affix versus, umpteen orbs or whatnot on the field.
I think it's like 5 show up or something.
Something like that.
It can be a lot.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of them show up depending on your polls. I just think there's a lot of options to this. Like, I'm a little biased. Back when I played the old affixes, when we're talking about the Afflicted and Incorporeal specifically, there would be opportunities where I can only Stormbolt and slow CC them or something like that. But if you actually Shattering Throw these guys, or if you interrupt them, it actually gets rid of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a play, I think, on a lot more classes than there was. That's why I like this affix more than Afflicted and Incorporeal.
Right, no, I'm just saying you could have adjusted it to be a mix of what we have now, but you don't have so many items come out, or orbs or whatever it is. Because to Sully's point, now you probably will need to have an AoE. So your warrior may still be able to deal with some of it, but how quickly can you deal with it, and how many can you deal with?
Right, so they definitely have not dealt with the comp dependence issue.
Right.
Yeah, especially as a person who's going to be playing Hunter next X-Pack, I am going to be so shafted when those orbs come out because I have nothing for them.
Right, yeah. You can, trap a couple of them, right?
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Don't worry, guys, I got a nice trap.
They all cross at the same time.
Yeah, crazy. You got your range interrupt, you got your traps, then you're like, well.
That's it.
Don't worry, guys, if I stare at them hard enough, maybe they'll disappear.
So if I had to make a change to an affix, because some of them, I almost feel like there's a balance in, like, when there's volcanic or when there's storming, I'm like, lol, no affix. I don't even read it. I don't even need to know about it. Don't stand in the circle. Call it a day.
Right.
But when there's incorporeal or afflicted or sanguine or, like, there's such a gross, separation between the difficulty of these affixes on the same bucket. I feel like they should kind of make a concise decision on what the expectation is of these affixes. Do we want it to be an incorporeal, an afflicted, where you have to use your cheesy abilities to cleanse or CC them, or do we want it to be things like sanguine, where it turns into boss mechanics and people not standing in things? And honestly, my choice of an affix is the Zalatath one's probably the most involved for every class. There's so many classes that have so many opportunities. Sorry, Hunter. But I think this is a step in the right direction, using affix like these.
Do you have AoE to deal with it as a warrior?
I have Shattering Throw.
Okay.
I do. Sully, how do you feel? How do you feel about, what do you think changes they should make to affixes? Is there any concept changes they should make? What would you like to see from one?
So, there's only 2 affixes that have been annoying the ever-loving crap out of me as a tank, DPS, and a healer. And one of the biggest ones is Sanguine, which we all call the Forbidden Jam. By the gods, do I hate the Forbidden Jam. So, as a tank and a DPS, I hate this stuff so much because if you're a melee, you have to pay attention. Is my tank going to move the ads? If not, there's one standing in the Forbidden Jam and just healing, and there's nothing we can do about it.
That's the absolute worst when the tank doesn't notice it. Oh my god.
So, something I wish they would do is, instead of just healing the ads, maybe give it, the ad takes a bit more damage while it's standing in it, but also deals a bit more damage just to spice things up or something.
Oh, like a raging, yeah.
Okay.
kind of like that, but you can choose whether you want to keep them in it or if you want to take them out of it.
I like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Sanguine
Um,
with a double-edged sword.
Yep.
Is that provides, think about that. That provides high-level play where, like, let's say we do 10% increased damage to them while they're in Sanguine,
Yeah.
but they deal 30% increased damage to us, right? We get to decide how long they sit in there. There's a really high-level play to that. That's a really,
Yeah, like,
really
you
cool
can-
idea.
It does leverage a lot onto the healer, though, if you keep him into Sanguine, so it makes you have to really put in some time to make sure
The
you're getting a
healer,
good
the healer already has a lot of leverage right now.
No. I'm saying it puts you're throttling them more to have to do a higher quality job.
but
Because
it is
if we're-
also
if
on
we're-
the tank.
Right. No, it's on both, I guess. So then, because the tank has to decide whether to keep it in, but you're also putting more effort onto the healer because if we're taking 30% more damage and only dealing 10% more, it's a 20% difference.
Well,
Yeah, but-
there's an interesting problem we're running into. We're
Yeah.
expecting the tank to notice when the healer's struggling now. That's an
Yes.
expectation.
Well, and that should be,
And-
honestly, in my opinion, on the tank's mind the entire time. Granted, we're not sitting in an era anymore where they're really going to struggle bus. You don't have to watch for, hey, I need mana anymore in chat, pretty much. Like,
Uh,
I don't know, have you needed mana anytime soon?
I mean,
When you
when I
heal?
run 8, 10s, and 12s, yeah. I'll be honest with you. When I run real keys, yeah. I do need fucking mana.
The other thing too is that once you get to that really high level where you're starting to do like 13s and 14s, you're constantly talking to each other about what's on CD, what's off CD, what's about to come up, so it would be easier for them in a way, I guess.
Right.
Right, a more comfortable
Yeah, you
approach.
just have a high level of communication then, which is fantastic. I wish they had that at all times.
And so this boils us down all the way to, does World of Warcraft need a better way to teach people these affixes? Or are we having a
Ooh.
community issue? Is it the fact that all these pug groups just want to show up and not know affixes and just blast the dungeon? Is there a way Blizzard could show them these affixes? Maybe they put them in heroic.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a hot take, right?
That is.
Could put a nerfed version of the affix in Mythic Zeros since they did want Mythic
Yeah.
Zeros to be a lot harder and teach them how to do Mythic Plus without the affixes or a timer.
I mean, what do you put in? Just tyrannical and fortified?
Changing
Or-
that next X-Spec so it only shows up towards the higher end, like 9, 10 keys.
I thought it was 2, 5, 10. Because I thought what they were doing in War Within, was my
They
understanding.
are changing how the affixes work. The secondary and third affix are staying in the same positions. The seasonal affix will be going up to 12 keys, I think, and then it stops showing up. And then the weekly ones that change, where bosses do more damage or ads do more damage, I think those show up around 9 or 10s.
So they're ultimately giving us more affix trouble, but they're easier? Well, but the Xal'atath effects doesn't strike me as easier. I'm going to be honest with you. If I walk into a dungeon, and it's fortified, and I have Volcanic, and I have Xal'atath, and I have Sanguine, I'm going to be fucking pissed off.
Well, right,
I'm going to
but
be
you-
honest with you.
You get a buff out of the Xal'atath, right?
You get
It's
the
a
haste
haste
buff for
buff.
everyone yep.
Yeah, no,
You get
I'd
up to,
still be pissed off. That doesn't really give me a bunch of warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, you get up to like 20% haste, I think, if you pop all 5 of the orbs
Maximum.
or something like that.
Maximum
That's
12 is where
still
they cap it
fucking
at.
good.
It's a shitty time warp, right?
Yeah,
It's like what? 3/4 of a time warp?
But
or
is
not,
there-
excuse me.
Is
Half a
there
time warp?
a cooldown on it that you get? Because like, don't you have that with time warp where you have to wait 10 minutes or whatnot?
Time
That's
warp,
lost.
if you talent into it, you can double time warp if you're a mage, but it only double time
Right.
warps for you.
Right. Yeah, Jordan gets his little personal one all the time when he plays mage.
I play whatever, dude. Arcane Mage is hard. Fuck you.
Yeah, go do your
Um,
trigonometry.
Share the lust.
The last topic we wanted to cover today is something a little less controversial. I haven't heard a whole lot of people having trouble with shrinking the keys down to like the 10 key level system rather than from 20. Like you get things like teleports after doing 10 keys. Instead of going up to 20, Mythic was brought up to a Mythic 10 plus difficulty. Do you think this was the right move? Do you think they should go farther? Do you think they shouldn't have done this? How do you feel about this?
So, when I first started doing keys, which was in Shadowlands, the highest key you had to do was a 15, which felt pretty nice. And then when they increased it to 20, that made me even happier because uh I am autistic, which also sometimes makes people think you're ADHD or whatever. So, anyways, having more keys to do keeps me more entertained because I get more, like, oh, I increased to doing a 5, but I still have to get to a 20. Even bigger road to go on. But the keys
Right.
just weren't hard enough, and it's just like a tad annoying.
So at the top end, it was okay. It looks like there's more work ahead of me, but it's not harder work.
Yeah. And so when they changed it to a 10, the keys got way fucking harder. I mean, I was doing 5s and I ran into people who were like still struggling. And I'm like, I like this. I like the struggle of doing a 2 and barely beating it with like 5 minutes left. I love this.
Yeah.
But my issue is I have less keys to run. And so when I jump from 2s to 5s, it's like I only got like 5 more key levels to go. I don't have a whole lot to work for now.
Yeah, it's less incremental in a way. I guess that's an
Mhm.
interesting way to put it. You don't get the the +3 key after +3 key after +3 key, or, the +1 +1 +1, where you're working up 11, 12, 13. And you bring up a good point because the vast difference between like a 7 and an 8 is insane.
Yes.
Or
Mhm.
let alone a 9 and a 10. Like, we're not even talking about that difference, right? So you bring up a very, very good point. It brings a lot of incremental advantages utilizing the lower key system. I almost wonder if they could break down keys a little bit more to this 20 system, to 20 key system, or extend it. Because people are doing 18, 19 keys right now.
If we could go back to the 20 key system but keep it as difficult as it is, I would be so happy.
I think so. There is a barrier because that does make... You're essentially extending how far out your gear is, right? And so you're making dungeons really, really hard to get the gear. Do you make these dungeons incredibly difficult to where it would just be way easier to do the mythic raid? Right? So the gear line is an interesting balance they have to figure out here. Because you can't be dropping... Because right now we're getting mythic tier gear from 8s and higher, right? So they can't drop more gear for these dungeons. They can add more tiers and make it harder, but the end game is still right there at the 8-10, unless they change all the loot specs and shit, right? So I'm interested to see where they end up with it, for sure. I do... So I guess I'll say I like the number scrunch. Sully, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on the number scrunch.
I'm still sitting about a mid. I haven't had
Mid?
enough seasons to really give you an answer.
Right. It's only been one.
True,
Not
it
even
has only
one.
been one. Nick, how do you feel?
I love it. I think it's great. I've absolutely loved the squish that they've done with this key stuff.
I think it's good, at least what they're doing with the baseline difficulty. With the high end, they definitely have to find a balance. They have to continue to work on the high end part of the game because that's what keeps us alive. The MDI guys, the world first guys, that's what makes hundreds of thousands of people play the game and watch the game, right? So, the last thing I wanted to touch on before we cut off our interview with the legendary Sully is I wanted to ask everybody what their favorite class and spec is. So, Nick, you're a paladin. We know.
Yeah. The light is the best.
I think Evoker's the best. Evoker is the absolute best ever. Sully,
I find it so weird.
shut up, Nick. Sully,
I
I said shut up. Sully, what is the best class?
Oh,
also have
this is a
spec.
tough question because I have played literally under everything under the great blue sky.
You're the best person to ask.
Uh,
What's your
I am
favorite?
one of those I'm one of those people that I love pet-based classes because they're so easy to break. So I'd have to say my two favorite ones are Beastmaster Hunter and obviously Demonology Warlock.
Oh,
Yeah.
the pet mastery specs. That's all right. You make good relationships with your pets and they murder for you. I guess I get it. I get it.
And they
They
work
do
pretty
all the
well.
work for you. Just sit there and press
Yeah.
buttons.
Yes.
Easy money. Well, Sully, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thanks for coming out.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for
Well,
having me.
yeah, welcome to the Valley of Spirits. To many more. We'll hear more from Sully definitely soon.
Oh, yes.
They are the WoW encyclopedia. Whenever we have questions, we definitely ask Sully. So I do appreciate you coming out so much. That was our legendary interview with Sully. They'll be around for sure in the future. We definitely like picking their brain. Very good insight. We definitely plan to have her around some more.
Yes, definitely. They are fantastic. And we love playing with them, too.
Yeah, anytime we can, definitely. Thank you so much, Sully, if you're listening. I appreciate you joining us. But we are going to move into Tavern Talk. So this is where we leave the script. We talk about definitely objective things only. Nick, you wanted to tell us about the Dojo Dungeon Invitational.
Yes, while I was managing our socials, I'd come across this Dojo Dungeon Invitational, brought it up to Jordan, and we've decided that we're going to push with it and go through it. It's a Mythic Keystone push-style weekend tournament that takes place July 28th to the 29th. Each day, there is a timed competition window that allows for a team of 6 players, a standard party of 5 with 1 reservist for a swap if needed, and that will use the keyholder's key to push as high as possible within a 3-hour window. If you're interested in doing it, registration is open until July 15th. You can find more information about the link in our description. I'm excited to do this because it's going to be the first time that I'm doing anything in a competitive sphere in World of Warcraft, and it sounds like it is in a slightly relaxed competition. But I think, Jordan, you're going to have more of a knowledge on a relaxed competitive format than I will.
The reason why I've never been like, hey guys, let's go join the Great Push MDI tournament is because when you show up, you have to be doing 19 keys. You have to have a group that is totally geared out and dabbing and has answers for every mechanic in every dungeon. That's why there is everybody running the same spec. You have Restoration Druid. You have the exact same comp for everybody. The cool part about this Keystone Push weekend is it puts you in tiers based on your Raider IO.
Yep.
We get to be put into a barrel of people in this tier of people and see how far we get on this ladder. It's an incremental. I think it's cool because it only takes 3 hours of your time. You walk in, you see what keys you get done. If it's a 7, a 9, and an 8, then cool. We're better than however many players. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's. I like the way they've set it up. I think it's going to be an interesting competition for us.
So we're trying to recruit people for this. Definitely if there's anybody listening interested in joining a group. We currently have 2 DPS and a healer, if I'm understanding correctly, right?
Yep, yeah. So we have 3 total, 2 DPS healer. You're healing, I'm DPS with the Rep Pally, and Sully's joining us as well.
And make sure, if you're listening, that you hit us up before July 15th. He said registration is open until July 15th.
Definitely.
So make haste. Join us into pushing some keys. We don't care if we're doing 7s or 8s or we're doing 15s.
You can contact us on our Facebook, our Twitter, or send an email.
Or comment on the video on Spotify, however.
Yes.
We will reach out to you, and we will invite you to the Discord, and we will crunch whatever keys we can. Very exciting. I'm excited for that. We did say in our Tavern Talk we were going to talk a little bit about the PvP gentleman we played with some.
Yeah.
We'll start with how well-focused he was. He knew a lot of interrupts. He knew a lot of timings. He was playing Devastation Evoker, and I was Preservation Evoker. I understood a lot of his placements. It was really cool to be able to root a lot of people and then have us both breath through them. I mean, there's nothing that feels like that. That was crazy. What I would say I learned the most from playing with him was taking advantage of mispositioning of the opponents. I learned a lot about that. You're almost waiting for them to get in a line so you can CC them in your Fisher. You're waiting for them to all three be in your Dragon Breath. He showed me a lot of opportunities how to influence people into that, make the tunnel. Make it to where they almost have to walk around the pillar to be able to line of sight you in a way, and then boom, they're all in Dragon Breath range. Showed me a lot of interesting and cool things like that. Nick, what do you think he showed you?
The big thing he showed me was that you actually need a legit set of PvP gear, because we've been just running with me and 2 trinkets and the sword. He was saying, going through it, how you actually have to have a full-on set of PvP gear in order to get extremely competitive as he is.
Yes.
Which I understand, and I kind of knew a little bit about, but I was like, we're doing all right with only having this. I don't need to do much more. But when we were playing with him, because he pulled higher level people, or us to those types of players, that I was like, oh, you actually really need it. Like, it shows that when you don't have the gear. So I think that was a big thing that he showed me. And it also was just like how insane it gets at that higher level. Because like I said, I've barely played PvP in my time on Warcraft, and you've pulled me into it, and even then it's still fun, but it was just a different level experience for me. So it was enjoyable. I loved it.
The interesting part about this PvP gentleman was when we played keys with him. When we did player versus environment content. I thought it was pretty... He was so skilled, had such a great understanding of so many classes, had such a beautiful player versus player understanding. Then once we got in a dungeon, there was no damage. There was standing and stuff. But it was an interesting difference. I just found myself... I kept wanting to show him the player versus environment experience. Like, I kept wanting him. He's like, I just log in and press H and play arenas. I wanted. It's almost like there's a whole part of a game that you're not even playing, dude. I really wanted to show him that. With the way he takes PvP and how seriously he takes PvP, once he gets his gear set in PvE and starts getting some pieces and learns how his class works, I think it would be an awesome... He would love it. I just think it's crazy that he's so skilled at PvP and doesn't give a crap about PvE. I thought that just blew my mind, which is a majority of this game. So I guess we'll wrap it up in PvP. We talked about how he is an excellent, better than both of us combined, player versus player. We just want to do some dungeons with him, too.
Yeah. Like you said, I'd love to show him the PvE side of the world. I think it'd be fun, but I think he's also very much rooted in the PvP.
He is a PvP bro. He does like his PvP. If you're listening, thank you for playing with us.
It's always fun, yeah.
Do some more dungeons with us. Our next topic was going to be LFR gearing. How we think it should be changed. So I'm going to just say a hot take, Nick, and you're going to tell me how you feel about it. Ready?
All right.
They should just double all the gear dropped in LFR. Go.
Yeah. Well, maybe not double. Maybe 1.5. But yeah.
No, double.
Why
Why is double too much?
So are you saying that... I guess give me the context on double.
There is, instead of when you down a boss, there's like 3 to 4 pieces. There's 6 to 8 pieces.
Oh, he's talking quantity of pieces dropped.
Just sheer, pure, same rolls. Don't screw with the rolls. Just double how much stuff drops.
Right. No, I mean, okay, so yeah, I would be with that. Okay.
I think with there being that many rolls, there's a lot better chance for... I mean, these are LFR people. These are guys just trying to get their 493 piece. And they've been in all this dungeon, even if it's the sweaty guys, which, thank you, sweat lords that join LFR like I do,
yes.
and pump and make make raids happen for people. Thank you guys, for real. But they're in there just for one goddamn piece. And they have an equal chance of getting it as a ton of the noobs. And so I want the noobs getting a couple of pieces. I want the noobs when they can roll on the bracers and the belt and the necklace. And I want them all to have those rolls. I think on such an entry-level skill level, I do admit there could be some problems with this. There is... WoW is playing the balance of how much should they see the content versus how much should they get the gear. I think in LFR, just give it to them. Double it up. Straight up double.
No, I'm with that because I know that I've had the biggest problem I've had with trying to even just do LFR and get my 2 paladins up is gearing with LFR. I had actually hands finally dropped, like I mentioned earlier, and lost it. And I don't know how many. I think I ran 3 or 4 different sections of the LFR, and nothing dropped but once, and it was a pain in the ass. And the guy who got it didn't even need it. Like,
So
I looked at him, and he had 500 something in it. I was like, why are you needing on these?
Well, back out of the binoculars. Take the binoculars off and take a look at this for what it is. Let's back way the heck up, all the way back. What is succeeding right now in the video game industry? Things like gacha games, things like Fortnite, things with these blast in your face tons of rewards. This is another way, as LFR is essentially the bridge into raiding. It's the very first taste these players get. And I think there is a certain argument to be made that dropping this much loot this early is not only going to pump a ton of people with gear, which you can just buy gear boosts anyway, but don't even get me into that. But these people can just buy into gear, and they don't have to do a whole lot to learn it, but they don't have to do it anyway. Are you going to make them wait a week for the gear again? No, just let them run the raid, get the gear, learn why a normal's tough. That's how I feel. So it's kind of a hot take. I understand there's a balance between the way they currently drop LFR gear, and double may be a bit much, but my vote's on double. Like, more loot.
Oh, yeah,
for the
no,
noobs.
more
Let's
loot
go.
would be great.
Yeah.
Well, even that would help with gearing so much better, too.
I do like it in an alt sense. We don't really get any kind of bonus for our alts on these loot tables. We'll see War Within, because they do drop all those, like, those crappy bind-on equips that you can, like, transfer on Battle.net, and with the new war bands, that could be really cool. That could be really easy to, like, store all those things in a certain slot, and then it's really easy for you to just log on to somebody, right-click, and have whatever gear. So I do think there's a place where they're creating a system where this could be gorgeous. I just think this would drop a ton of gear in LFR.
Well, and it would make it, like you said, make it so much better for noobs, and then even in an alt sense, it makes it easier.
From an alt sense, it gets bigger.
Yeah. No,
it gets
does.
into war bands from an alt sense. But
it does.
Purely new players, we all know what LFR is.
Well,
all of us, Nick and I know we're going in there, and half of the people are going to die on Razagath. We know. That's how it is. Half of the people are not going to know to go to the markers on the table, choose left and right, and you know that's LFR. That's how it is. How can you make it more rewarding for these new players to play LFR? Just dump them gear. Literally back the dump truck up. Be like, beep, beep, here's shoulders, here's blade, here's offhand. Like, especially with how secondary stat focused it is right now. Like, finding your best in slot is way more complicated than it was in, well, I would say even in Shadowlands. I would say your stat balance was, because you had such obvious and clear-cut diminishing returns, and you knew once you got to 45% haste, you're like, oh, you're almost dipping into triple diminishing returns. You're just wasting your time. Now they don't talk about where the diminishing returns are on each character. You have to sim stuff and figure out how much each ability scales. And I do think they have some work to do on secondary stats.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do with gearing. Yeah, I didn't want to get all the way down into this path. It's a tavern talk, so I did get a little bit off topic.
No,
but
it's not good.
I think a good place to start is pumping LFR full of gear. For sure.
Right, but then you also get the opposing argument, too, of just, well, they want us to play more, too, so...
I guess they want us to log in every week and play
it's the carrot and
LFR
stick method.
on our alts,
Well,
I guess. Yeah,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, I've played it on both alts for the Awakened raid to try to get the better gear out of the Awakened raid, and have gotten, I don't think, anything. But that does mean that the vault on Tuesday, when this is released, is going to be pretty good.
Well, I'm a firm believer World of Warcraft wants to be the only game you ever play. And so if they want to do that, they can make the changes.
I mean, I will say it is damn near almost the only game I play.
It is. I play some Fortnite. During Dragonflight and with their content release schedule, I'm just really impressed. Like, Guild Wars and Final Fantasy are built, and Final Fantasy gets a subscription. Guild Wars doesn't. They're built on this monetization schedule. Everybody is used to. Everybody's like, yeah, it's part of the game. You pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get fucking married and shit in Final Fantasy. Like, it's stupid. And they don't meet their roadmaps. Their things come out late. We're getting War Within in fucking August. They followed all their roadmaps. I just think this is the MMO that's on the right track. They really are working on the barrier between ingenuity and comfort. So I guess we'll leave that up to you.
I think you're right on that.
I mean, a good example is dynamic flying. Like, nobody's gonna joke about that. Guild Wars did it first, right? Like, Guild Wars made dynamic flight a part of their thing.
Right.
But World of Warcraft came out with original flying, and they are releasing hundreds and hundreds and then the pre-patch, there will be 198 different mounts that will now be able to dynamic fly. WoW is like, we understand this is a core part of our game that we need to change, while they still come out with good raids and good dungeons, and they're always changing their affixes. Now, all this is set aside. Now they've done all this for the questing experience. They've redone. They want all your old mounts, which makes them no money. They're not selling these mounts to you. You don't have to rebuy it to get dynamic flying. It just has it now. And those are the kinds of things that WoW is doing for us. I don't see those kinds of things from a game like Final Fantasy or Guild Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just really impressed.
No, I've been vastly impressed, especially with coming back in Dragonflight with what Warcraft has done, and it's like you said, the dynamic flying, and there's a lot of more stuff coming down the road. And I know I've harped on it a lot, but even the roadmap they've given us, that's something they haven't done prior, and that's fantastic that they're doing that. I think they're just kind of stepping up to the plate even more now because they're seeing that. Yeah, they're still the king MMO. But they are maybe being chipped away, I guess, because other people are playing like Final Fantasy or Guild Wars and stuff. So, I think that is a part to play too in what they're doing. But they're doing it
competition
in the
is
right
good,
manner.
right?
No, I'm not
Keeps our
saying
game
competition
humble.
is bad, but I think that they're seeing this increased competition happening, and they're having to get good again. And I like the fact that it's kind of stoking the fire.
They've
back
responded
up with them.
to it, yeah.
Exactly.
I always get excited when they post a roadmap or a blue text now, because I know it's something worth reading. Like, we're not going to talk about Shadowlands time where I was like, oh, new hotfixes came out, whatever. I don't even want to read it. I don't even care.
Yes.
I think it's interesting because they did fire a lot of the people that were in charge, or, well, laid off a lot of the people that were significantly in charge of the gameplay of the game, and maybe this was more just than I thought, because the game is meeting expectations and exceeding it. The things we're complaining about are affixes they've told us about ahead of time.
Right.
They're not out yet. We're not playing against these affixes, and we're bitching about them. Like, that's something we really got to remember as a community. Back the hell up, right? We're not playing against these new affixes. Xal'atath affixes not out yet.
But we're still able to talk about it. And we're able to figure out how we want to deal with it.
And we're already talking about plans and problems, and they're listening to us. I'm vividly impressed. And I'm excited to be a part of this game as it grows. And join me together as we bridge 10 million subs here, hopefully, with the War Within. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was our LFR gearing debate. That's where we ended up. Let's bring it back. Good tavern talk. Definitely the rails are lost at this point. There are no rails anymore. The last thing I wanted to bring you guys through was, in our interview with Sully, we talked a little bit about Sanguine being a double-edged sword. What I mean by that is when you keep the mobs in Sanguine, let's say the Forbidden Jam, as they called it, if you keep them in it, do they deal an increased damage? Yes. You know, they could even make it as harsh. I think they could do less than 30%, like we said in the interview. But even if it's as harsh as a 30% damage increase to your tank or to players when they do an AoE, if you get a 10% increased damage, you get to play the line. You get to keep them in there as long as you can and then pull them out. But that also creates a very simple context for players that aren't as good. It's still same old Sanguine. You just bring the guys out of the Forbidden Jam. If they're in the Forbidden Jam, bad news. They're going to hurt, they're going to murder, and they're going to be angry, and they're going to heal. That's why I think they should take away from healing them. They should make it just spicy jam. The mobs are spicy, but they're squishy. You know what I mean? It softens them, but they're angry.
Right. Now, I think it's a good change to it. And it makes you have to kind of think about how you're going to deal with that too at a higher group content. Like depending on who's tanking or what class is tanking and healing, how are you going to be able to mitigate damage or heal through that damage if the tank doesn't mitigate? Because if you don't have good group discussion or communication, how are the tanks and healer going to talk through what they want to do, how they want to do it?
There's some advantages where the tank, ultimately Sanguine is a huge tank. Ultimately, Sanguine is big on the tanks. A lot of tank responsibility coming from it.
Yeah.
But the tank can be like, oh crap, I've had to use 3 or 4 cooldowns now. We can't keep these guys in the Sanguine. I'm just going to pull them out. We can't keep this trash in the Sanguine anymore. Which this brings a lot of tank responsibility, which can be great and bad if you have a good tank, which I hope Sully, the legend themselves, are listening. Then you're going to be fine, because Sully will choose whether or not they should stand in the Forbidden Jelly or not. But there could be tanks that are different. There could be tanks that don't understand the Forbidden Jelly and die all the time because the mobs were doing 30% increased damage forever. Or there could be tanks that hold it in there for a little bit until they get like half health. They're like, okay, this is spicy. Then they pull them out. So there's a lot of play in there.
Oh, yeah, no,
I still think it should, actually, if they're specifically Retribution Paladin named Zara with any alt codes, then they actually should be nuked in the Sanguine. That's the only way they need to fix it. One shot. Like, if you stand in it, you're dead, you know? It's the only way to nerf Paladins. You gotta help your stats, guys.
I bet that Paladin just is horrible, too.
No, because Nick wrecks the charts. Nick is helping show all the Paladins out there that they're broken, just so you know. Nick's part of the problem.
I'm always part of the problem.
He's good, too. Honestly, ban him. But that was our last topic we wanted to cover in the Tavern Talk. Nick, would you do us the fabulous honor of sending us out?
I will. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Valley Spirits. We're your hosts, Jordan and Nick, your go-to Horde players. Join us in Valdrakken on the Mal'Ganis server. Look up our guild, the Electric Boogaloo, for some epic adventures. Stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and by searching for the Valley Spirits podcast. Don't miss out on the latest updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Until next time, may your quests be glorious and your loot be plentiful. For the Horde.